welcome to this day's beautiful day outside, and I'm stuck inside. Should go outside soon. Hello, welcome to today's video. My name is Jonathan, and thank you so much for subscribing and watching my videos. It really means a lot to me that you're out there and that you're liking my content, especially for you writers out there. I hope that I've been some help to you in this journey, but hey, we're just getting started, right? We're going to be going in an in-depth chapter analysis of my novel, Nights Without Kings. So I self-published this novel through CreateSpace, and it is titled Nights Without Kings. It is the first book in the Harmony of the Apostles trilogy, and I wanted to go in an in-depth chapter-by-chapter author commentary of the book. So if you have read it, feel free to just take a seat, get comfortable, because I'm going to be talking about these first 3 chapters. If you haven't read it, I recommend that you go over to the description, check it out on Amazon, and give it a look. It might be something that you like. It's classified as a dark fantasy novel, so it's very realistic and kind of sad in some parts, obviously, because it's dark fantasy. Think about in the similar vein of Dark Souls if you played the video game, or Berserk if you've read the series. So very much inspired by Game of Thrones and those sort of darker fantasy fiction kinds of novels. Also, I just put out last week a Spotify playlist for my novel. So the way you're supposed to listen to this playlist is you read the first chapter and then you listen to that first song. And each chapter has a song that goes along with it, and I'm going to be using that same theme here. So if you want to check out my Spotify playlist, there's going to be a link down in the description. But also, if let's just say you just got the book, right, and you're just watching this series too, I would recommend you read the first 3 chapters and then watch this video, and then maybe it'll give you a better insight on what I'm going through. I think that is the ultimate way of reading the book, is by listening to the music and watching these videos to get the most content out of the book, because I think it is so layered and so dense that you may not get some of the context that I have in there. It's texting me. Unless you watch this video and listen to the music. So if that's something that you're really into, well, welcome. This is the perfect place for it. So have a seat, get comfortable. There's room for everybody here, and let's just get into it. So Nights Without Kings. The reason I chose the title Nights Without Kings is because while writing this book, I was kind of looking for a title, and there were many titles that I went through. And some of them were like Age of Man, The Last Age of Man, Knights and Kings, without the K, or for the Knights, Throne of the Apostolate, Deceiving Nature, Blinded by the Heavens, Rite of the Undead, Night of the Darkest Man, The Blessing Most Divine, Brand of the Undead, and Seal of the Abyss. I had so many titles that I was looking at, but I didn't end up choosing any of those. I chose Nights Without Kings. First it was Knights and Kings. I think that was the title that I first came with. Because, obviously one of the main focuses is knights. Lamaya, the main character, she is a knight. And then obviously we have kings. But then I thought of the idea like knights, in order to become a knight, you have to have a king in order to knight you. So you cannot be a knight without a king. So that concept was what I went with that and called it Knights Without Kings, because it means no direction, no leadership. What happens when a knight doesn't have a king? That's the question that I was asking. And, you may not get that from just looking at the title, but that's the point I was going for, is Knights Without Kings, people without leadership, darkness without light. So Harmony of the Apostles, that's the overarching, trilogy title. Whenever we get to that point to talk about it, that's when I'll mention a little bit more in further detail what actually the Harmony of the Apostles is. So I wanted to read the foreword just real quickly. Special thanks to my friend Anna Beek, my brother and sister Josiah and Tabitha, who continually inspired me to write, and to Renee Rhodes for bearing up under pestering to read this book. Thanks to all my beta readers, and final thanks to a special person that was always there to inspire these horrid events in this novel. You know who you are. So first of all, Anna Beek was a person 2 years ago that was really influential in my life, especially right after my life pretty much broke down. She was there to help me and to push me forward, and sometimes needed to kick my ass in a way that I needed to be kicked. So special thanks to her. Then my brother and sister, Josiah and Tabitha, when I was writing this, they were very much there for me, and as well, I was always telling them, please read this. And they would read a couple chapters. They didn't read the whole thing. I still don't think they've read the whole thing, but that's okay. They were there when I needed them to be there, and that's really what matters. And then the final thanks to a special person, well, that's person I'm not going to name here just because, I mean, I don't name it in the foreword, so, but you know who you are. I'm not bitter at all. And also the artwork that is depicted here is thanks to Emilio C. Rodriguez. He was a wonderful person to work with. So if you're looking for someone to do your artwork for you, I heavily recommend you look up Emilio C. Rodriguez. I don't think I'm going to give him his email, put the email out there because I don't have permission to do that. But get in contact with him through his Pinterest. He's really good at working with you, and he's also very cheap, so for good quality. So I think I paid too little. I should have paid more for it, but special thanks to him anyways. So let's get into it. The first chapter is called Dancer of the Ruins. So I chose this title because, as you may know, Dark Souls is very much a huge influence in writing these stories. And the Dancer of the Ruins is kind of similar to the Dancer of the Boreal Valley in Dark Souls 3. So obviously it's just a title that I kind of mimicked, and it's called Dancer of the Ruins. And the whole question that I want the reader to be thinking about is who exactly is the Dancer of the Ruins? Is it the Wyvern or is it Elamaya? There is a third character in there, Bertrand, but seeing as he dies in the first chapter, I don't think that most people will be thinking about him. I think it's either the Elamaya or the Wyvern. Now, who exactly am I thinking it is? Obviously, I think it's Elamaya, but you'd be okay to think that it's the Wyvern too. Really, that is up to the reader to decide that part. So the chapter begins with Elamaya being chased. Elamaya is a knight, by the way, and she is being chased by a Wyvern. So Elamaya is finishing the trials of the cherub. In this trial, she needs to hunt down this Wyvern and kill it in order to become perfect, essentially. And we introduced one of the sayings, if a weapon is not used in anger, it matters not which weapon you use. And this saying is funny because I was looking for like quotable moments, and I was trying to put one into this chapter, and that's the first one that came to mind. When I was a kid, I used to have these G.I. Joe figures, and my parents bought it for me, and with it came a comic book. Now, I didn't own many comic books at the time because there weren't any comic book stores, and it was a G.I. Joe comic. It was very silly. It was very low quality, but one of the lines that I'll always remember is like, if a weapon is not used in anger, it doesn't matter which weapon you use. I think I changed it a little bit for the story, but here it worked a little bit because Elamaya's halberd is broken, and Bertrand says it doesn't matter. You know, as long as you have sound mind, as long as you're patient, because you can have the sharpest weapon and still die. That's the whole point I'm going for, is you can have the greatest weapon and still die. What matters is your brain. What matters is your patience. And I think that isn't just applied to just fighting off wyverns, for example. I think you can apply that to real life. It's like, it doesn't matter what your situation is. If you're in a bad situation, you can still succeed. You know, it all depends on your mind. It all depends on how you view your current circumstances. So you can be the richest man in the world, and you can have everything and still lose at life. So that's the whole point I'm trying to go for, is it doesn't matter what weapon you use. It doesn't matter the kind of life you have, as long as you're of sound mind, and as long as you're persistent in your goals. So Coral Castle is also very much inspired by a level in Dark Souls 3, and I'm going to show you it right now. So this is one of my favorite places to write because there was so much mystery, and it was just a very eerie level to play through. So I thought, man, I could have something like that in my book. And I put it in Coral Castle, and I gave a backstory, my own personal backstory as to why this happened. And Coral Castle is very important, not necessarily to this book, but to the end game overall. And I don't think a lot of readers will pick up on that until the third book comes out, which will come out in 3 or 4 years. But I'm setting up the groundwork for these plot points to be exploited later on, that's one of the things about a writer. Like, if you can set these little seeds and be patient with them, and they'll bear fruit for you later on, that's perfect. That's the kind of writing that you want to go for. So here we come to a main point, Bertrand, and why I kill him. So I killed off Bertrand in the first chapter because I wanted to show the reader this is what you're in for. A lot of my betas were a little bit upset because they were endeared with Bertrand within the first few pages, and that's what I wanted. I wanted them to care for him and be like, okay, he's like a father figure to Elamaya, and I kill him. The thing is, he didn't die by the wyvern, which is another point I wanted to make. It's like the greatest force of the greatest antagonist in this chapter doesn't even kill Bertrand. Bertrand dies from a stray rock flying into his head and basically embedding itself in his brain, and that's how he died. And I wanted to show just the randomness. I want to showcase that people just die out of nowhere without even, like, he was doing everything right. You know, he was her shield bearer, he was behind Elamaya, he was a little bit of a distance away, yet still that stray rock just, hit him straight in the head. So I wanted to just showcase that randomness and show the reader, hey, this is what you're in for. This isn't going to be a happy ride. This is going to be a little bit traumatizing to the characters. So I hope that's the point that I was able to convey to the reader. Next, we come to the wyvern, why I didn't kill the wyvern. Now, in the first chapter, when I first wrote it, Elamaya did kill the wyvern and was able to be named perfect, but then, because she finished the trials. But then I thought, you know what? What if she finishes the trials but doesn't kill the wyvern? What does that mean? It means that she lied. So she lied about killing the wyvern. So basically, in not killing the wyvern, first of all, if Bertrand were alive at the moment she had the chance to kill the wyvern, she would have done so, because Bertrand would have instructed her. However, Bertrand died moments before, which means that she didn't have that leadership. So already you see that Knights Without Kings theme, the fact that when you don't have leadership, you really screw up sometimes. And here we see it, because if she would have killed the wyvern, I think her conscience would have been a little bit more staunch. Like she wouldn't be doubting herself so much in the novel if she had killed the wyvern. So a lot of my readers loved the fact that the wyvern could communicate with Elamaya using the brain telepathy or something like that. So they thought that was going to be a major point of this book, but the wyvern really isn't a big part of this novel, more so the second one. But this one, it's more just of, hey, this is just an introduction to the world, to the themes, and the characters. So the quote in chapter 1, "She wiped the tears from her eyes, but they were lost amidst the rain." This is a quote to Blade Runner's "Lost Like Tears in Rain."
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
And I mean, that was not that obvious, but it's whenever I read this part, that's what I'm going for. So then after she doesn't defeat the wyvern, but she says she does, she meets with the Hallowed Masters. Now the Hallowed Masters are 3 priests named Ortengrin, Engerame, and the Protector. So when I was making the names for these priests, I wanted to go with the most outlandish names you could possibly come up with. So Engerame or Ortengrin. I think Ortengrin does come a little bit from one of the Witcher books. I think I picked it up there, but I don't know exactly where I picked it up. But anyways, that's the one that came to mind. And lastly, the Protector is the most normal of the names. And I did a cute little thing with him where he doesn't speak at all. Like if he was able to speak, he would have the power of angels to call upon them. The thing is, he was sworn to never speak again. So that's kind of a useless power, but he ends up, you'll see later on, because that's important. That's important. He only says one sentence in the entire book, and I think the sentence that he uses is very powerful and really highlights the nefariousness and I'm not going to say evil nature of the masters, just the ambiguous. You don't know exactly who they are, or even if they're human, but you pick up on that later on in the book. So the end of this chapter finishes with Elamaya being named perfect, and she has her own platoon, and she's named Knight Captain of the Holy Silver Angels platoon. Now, I chose the Holy Silver Angels platoon, the purple holy rhinos, and this is based off of, it's very much inspired by Berserk, Kentaro Miura's Berserk Knights, where they have holy captains, and it's very much surrounded by religious contexts. And that's what I wanted to highlight. Terra has just hyper-religious customs, and everything is based around their god, Oridmir. And Oridmir is this horse that they revere as their god and is kind of a protector to them. Now that's very important later on. Oridmir and his origins, they all come into play later on in this same novel. So that's it for chapter 1, and now let's move on to chapter 2. So chapter 2 is titled Augur of Fate. Now Augur of Fate means ill-fated. So kind of in a way, it's the title means ill-fated fate. And I guess you can pick up on that basically by the translation. So this chapter begins with two characters, Bendrick and Sieglind, both in a training room using wooden training swords. Now, originally when I first wrote this chapter, I had a chase scene, and Bendrick was chasing this person down with a sword and actually kills him. But then I thought, you know what, we just had this first chapter which was very explosive, and we need to deflate the tension a little bit, because here's the thing, if you're a writer and you're constantly upping the tension and always there's something going on and always there's someone going to die, you end up completely losing your tension. Interestingly enough, too much tension deflates tension. So what you want to do is have tension at the right moment. So what I did, having these people in a safe environment using wooden training swords, obviously they're not sharp, I'm deflating the tension naturally, right? And this puts the reader at ease. So when a reader is at ease, it's very easy then to build it up and then bam, you snap them with a death or with some sort of mystery. And that's what I wanted to do with this second chapter, is just put the reader at ease. So then in chapter 2, what is meant to be sharper, the blade or the one who wields it? This is a quote to Braveheart, and this is the scene.
I know you can fight. But it's our wits that make us men.
And Braveheart is one of my favorite movies, so naturally I wanted to just add a little bit of spice from that and then make it my own in my book. Okay, then I introduced the main conflict of the first act, and that is between the King Aeland and Queen Gwendolen. So basically this is what happens. Queen Gwendolen has been married to King Aeland for years, and she decides one day to leave him, go back to her home country, which is in Ivatera. So she leaves Wezereth, goes all the way to Ivatera, and then declares war on King Aeland and all of Wezereth due to disagreements and big problems in their relationship. So her under her father, they both declare war. Well, at least it seems that way. We introduce William Benhart also. He is the first voice to the king, so he has high political influence over the king and the country's politics. So in this scene, he's like super mad and super distressed that the queen has done this, especially after all that he's done for her. So we show the conflict here, that there's a war looming over both countries, and that is bad, obviously. Then we introduce one of my favorite characters, Rebecca. So Rebecca is an elf, and she has blue hair, and the difference is with most elves in fiction and all that stuff, very tropish, right? And I didn't want to have that same trope, so her ears are sliced. So the ends of her ears are just sliced off. And in elven culture, that's considered a curse. You are cursed if you're basically condemning the gods and your birthright by slicing your ears off in a ceremonial fashion. So Rebecca slices her ears off, and it's not very clear why to these characters on why she did that, but it is explained later on, so I'm not going to spoil it if you haven't read that far. But just about all of my beta readers loved Rebecca, and she's one of my favorite people to write for, so I obviously think she's great. She comes up with a note from one of her spies that reads, "The murk shifts and stirs, she will kill all." So this is basically confirming everything that William was saying, that she is going to declare war and she is going to invade. So that quote, "The murk shifts and stirs," is a bastardized quote from Dark Souls 2, and this is the scene here. So if you haven't already guessed, Dark Souls is a huge inspiration to me. It's one of my favorite video games, and that's kind of like Stephen King's inspiration were movies. My big inspiration is video games, and I don't consider myself a gamer anymore, but I sure was when I started writing this 4 years ago. Let me mention real quick why I chose Bendrick Okay, so Bendrick is this old man, and he's way past his prime. He was a lieutenant in the wars, in 2 wars before this point, and so he's old. He's not the typical protagonist, but I chose him because of that point, because I didn't want to make it a young buck that's like, oh, everyone's treating me unfairly and off to his adventures. That's boring, and that's been done so many times before. Instead, I chose someone already at the end of his prime, someone who just would not be chosen for a fantasy epic. He'd more likely be the secondary character. The wise old man is really the one who's going to guide the young protagonist. But that's not the case here. He is the protagonist, and the secondary character is his daughter Sieglind. Now, Sieglind is the typical main character, except she's not a main character. That's what I wanted to throw over on. That's what I want to throw on this character's head, is just the fact that she's very agile, she's very smart, she can wield a blade very well. She's got long white hair, or kind of short white hair, and she's just the epitome of a main character trope. But I didn't make her that. I made her a secondary character because I wanted to focus more on Bendrick. So that's kind of how I turned that trope around a little bit. Anyways, after all this, William finally convinces Bendrick to go to a war council and talk about what they know. And so they do. And William is telling Bendrick, hey, Bendrick, you need to advocate for war. That's something that you need to do, because her armies are well replenished, or they're very strong, and Wezrith's armies are coming out of 2 wars, right? So they're very diminished, and they need more time. They need to train more people more in order to have an all-out war with Ivatera, who hasn't been in a single war yet. So despite Wezrith's armies being very well trained, they're not that numerous because of the wars. So that's what William is afraid of, and he convinces Bendrick to join his side. However, in the war council, William says they can't go to war, they shouldn't. And this surprises Bendrick, because this whole time William was trying to convince him of going to war. And despite him being played like that, there is just no alternative. He has no choice but to advocate for war, because he sees the danger that is coming. So him saying that, and by the way, Bendrick and Aeland have a history. They were kids when they went to the Athenaeum, which is like a school of sorts. And so they have a history between them, and Aeland really trusts Bendrick, even though they're a little bit estranged after the war. They really didn't talk very much because of the things that are, just life, basically. Bendrick decided to just kind of go into seclusion and do his own thing. And King Aeland, well, he's a king, so he has a nation to rule over. So by William playing Bendrick like this, I'm kind of hinting at further political schemes that he has under his sleeve. And a lot of my beta readers were right not to trust him. And a lot of my readers didn't trust him either. So that's definitely something that I wanted to showcase, is the fact that William is ambiguous. The fact that, hey, he played the main character, so he probably isn't as good as he makes himself out to be. His last quote in this chapter is, "The greatest player pretends not to play." So that's kind of like, he's a little bit nefarious, a little bit creepy, and that's kind of what I wanted to go for in this chapter. And lastly, we meet Korhus. Now, Korhus is another one of my favorite characters. All of my beta readers loved him. He is this drunk warrior that's really old. So he, just like Bendrick, is past his prime as well, but that doesn't stop him from having fun. And he has fun by going with women and drinking, and that's the kind of character that he is. And he sparks a little bit of life back into Bendrick in the last chapter, and saying that, hey, they're going to go in an envoy to go talk to Queen Gwendolyn and hopefully stop this war from happening. This is a suggestion that Bendrick came up with in the War Council. Korhus wants to tag along, to not only to join them for protection, because he is a very formidable force, but also just to see what's going to happen. He's curious as to whether or not Bendrick will be able to stop a war. Something that he kind of doesn't want. He wants the war to happen because he doesn't have a good fight. That's the kind of attitude that he is. He doesn't really think about people's lives. He thinks more about fighting and having fun and drinking, which that's partly what makes him endearing, is the fact that he's a balance to Bendrick, who is the exact opposite, who has a history of death and doesn't want anything to do with death anymore, and even has this saying, no blood, or no killing. Okay, and now we move on to Chapter 3, The Iron Aegis. So one of my favorite video games, obviously like I said, video games are my great inspiration, is Dead Space. So I love Dead Space, at least the first and second one. The third one's okay, but anyways, we're not talking about Dead Space here, maybe in another video, but not here. One of the planets in Dead Space is called Aegis 7, and I wanted to use that name so bad, so then I looked up what Aegis means, Aegis means a protection, backing, or support of a particular person or organization. So in this case, the Iron Aegis, that's like a blacksmith shop. So that's the title of the chapter. So here we see Elamaya doing the taming. So the taming is something that the greatest warrior in the land is supposed to do. It's basically a celebration when she breaks a horse. And so she does so, and if she falls off the horse, obviously the taming is tainted, and there's big problems. I didn't really demonstrate that point well enough in this third chapter, but now you know. She does so, but the queen isn't there, and she is supposed to be. The queen is supposed to be watching the taming, but she isn't there. By this time already, she's come back to Ivatera, and where Elamaya is from. And I made this little detail that way because sometimes things happen in life, or you make accomplishments that you think are just life-changing, but to someone else, they could care less. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just trying to highlight this is how she felt in that moment, that the queen wasn't there to see her complete the taming. So then after the taming, the queen does show up, and she shows up to witness a gladiatorial fight. So basically, these gladiatorial fights happen between slaves, and yes, Avatara does have slaves, but they're different. They're not slaves as in the Egyptian, Jewish kind of thing. Slaves here do have status. So that's kind of the slavery dynamic that I wanted to have in this book, is that there are slaves, but so they have to do what the Ivatarans tell them, but they can also gain status, they can also gain responsibilities. And here, the gladiators, if one of them wins, he can have his freedom and a house in Ivatera. So that's kind of, they're more like servants, really, more than just slaves. So my beta readers and regular readers loved Biotin. He's one of the gladiators that shows up, and I build him up. I make him seem like this ultra badass guy, because he is. You know, there's this one fight where he's fighting this guy with cudgels, and cudgels are like wooden clubs, small wooden clubs, and there's like barbed wire around them. So this other guy's like wailing on him, and Biotin realizes that this guy's advantage is his reach. So if he's able to come in close, he can kill him. So Biotin drops his sword and his shield, grabs the cudgels, and then bashes the guy's head in. And I just wanted to, and everyone's like in awe of this guy. Everyone's cheering for him, Biotin, Biotin, and then I kill him. So there is this. So the gladiator fight is going on. There's sand up in the air. One of the gladiators lied down on the ground pretending he was dead, and then whenever everyone else had died and Biotin was standing like victor, everyone's cheering his name, this other guy comes up and bam, like kills him, like bashes his head in, and then stamps his head, getting all the brain matter all over the sand, and everyone is pissed. And this is a Wezerithian, and he knows that the queen just got away from Wezerith, like escaped Wezerith, so he starts making fun of her. Well, the queen gets pissed, and she gets her bow and then just kills this Wezerithian, and everyone starts cheering. And the reason I did this was because I wanted to showcase, just because you have a lot of power, just because you're really awesome and strong, doesn't stop you from a cheap shot. Get stabbed in the back. I wanted to showcase that no one is safe. Even the people that you love, they can die at any moment. And I also wanted to showcase Gwendolyn's power and her will, that despite being treated terribly by King Aeland, she's still a threat. She's still a danger to people who she doesn't like. And that becomes more apparent further and further along in the book, and really dangerous too. So then Elamaya goes to the Iron Aegis, to the blacksmith shop. Her halberd that was broken in chapter 1 is finally fixed, and there she meets Andre of the Iron Aegis, whose initials are AIA. So anytime there's a weapon that has the initials AIA, that was made in Ivatera by Andre of the Iron Aegis. So Andre is a huge inspiration from Andre of Astora in Dark Souls 1 and 3.
Well, a newcomer, I see. I am Andre. I serve at this shrine as a humble smith, forging weapons. You're in search of the Lords of Cinder, I trust?
And again, I just love this character so much. I mean, you have to go to him so much in the video game, so I really love him a lot. And then I included him in the book and gave him a little bit of backstory. And then we meet Emeth. Now, Emeth is an ambiguously dark character, and all we're doing here is just introducing him and the Arcan Blade. So let me just go with Emeth real quick. Emeth if you kind of bastardize the words a little bit, can mean or can sound like a myth. So there you go. Now the Arcan blade is a magical blade in it looks like a katana, and that's how it is used by humans and normal people. But there is a myth, a legend, a prophecy, if you will, of a half elf, which is like a half man, half elf person that will one day wield the Arcan blade, and it can rend earth in two with just one swing of the sword. Like, it's really powerful. And Emeth has kind of found the pieces to this blade and reforged it, and who knows how it was broken, but that doesn't matter now. The fact is that he has this powerful blade, and he is going to go somewhere else. Like, we don't know exactly where he goes to, because Elamaya kind of doesn't believe him. She's like, wow, really? Elves exist? So at this point, we bring in the fact that she doubts their existence, which goes into a cultural doubting of elven existence, because if the stories are correct, they were in this world 500 years before, but they disappeared for some reason that the Ibatarians don't know about. The Wesserithians do, but Ibatarians don't know why they disappeared, so they doubt their existence at all. Now, the Arcan blade is kind of based on the Witcher Geralt of Rivia. He is called Gwynblade, and I love the spelling of that so much, so I wanted to actually use it for a blade, and I don't really use it much more. I don't really use those kind of spellings for anything else other than this prophecy, just to showcase how crazy and out there it is. But, I mean, it really does come into play in the second book for sure, and in the third book, that's where everything comes to form. So it's very important to keep the Arcan blade and Emeth in mind, because they're important characters. So this chapter ends with preparing Elamaya for what's to come. She's finally come into form. She has her platoon. She is ready. And another reason I chose Elamaya, because usually with the hero's journey, you start a character in the middle or at a lowest point of their lives. So, for example, Lord of the Rings, I think Aragon, which is, or even the Wheel of Time series, which all three of those things are the same. I only give a pass to J.R.R. Tolkien because he's the first one to do it. I don't give a pass to Aragon or the Wheel of Time because I think it's really cheap to focus to copy those subjects just because it was popular for Tolkien. So I definitely did not want to do that. I didn't want to start with Elamaya building up. I wanted her to be at the highest point possible in her life. Why, you ask? Because there's only one way from that point, and it's down. And that's kind of what I wanted to showcase with this character, is saying this person's already achieved everything that she's ever wanted, but she can still lose it. And that's kind of the point that I wanted to make with this character, and the idea, the concept with Elamaya is the fact that you can do everything right and still lose. And that's kind of mirroring my life in some regards. Like, I thought I did everything right. I thought I made some decisions that were good, and ended up being the exact opposite, and I ended up getting screwed for it. And I have no one else to blame but myself. Sometimes the circumstances were over my head where I had no control over it. Actually, a lot of them did. But the point is, that's how I relate to Elamaya the most, is the fact that she had everything. And we'll see what else happens in the book. Alright, well, thank you for watching. That is the in-depth commentary of chapters 1, 2, and 3 of the novel Knights Without Kings. So if you have any questions, if there was something that I missed or that you want clarification over, feel free to leave a comment in the description. I'll answer any questions that you have. And now, I love talking about this book, and if you're interested in reading it, it's going to be available on Amazon, on Kindle, and paperback. There is going to be hardcover, not for a couple years until the third one is released, and then I'm going to release a special edition, and we'll see where that goes. I might do a Kickstarter for it so that you guys can help me, that I can format all these things and make them really pretty. And obviously that's way off in the future. It's just an idea right now, but that's how things start, right? Things start as ideas. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I post a lot on those mediums. Now, next week I'm going to do chapters 4 through 7, I believe. And, so if you're reading along the book with me, you can wait until that happens or just read it along too. So thank you again so much for subbing and liking. And if you haven't done that yet, you know what to do. I love you, and be safe out there, okay? There are a lot of crazy people running about doing crazy things. Don't be one of them. And just love on people, because that's why we're here on this world, is to love people and encourage them, not to spread hate and division. We are here to love, and I want to spread that out, and I want to tell you all to just go out there, have fun, enjoy yourselves, enjoy life, because it is a beautiful life. And I'm going to throw up because I'm saying so many positive things, me being mostly a negative person because I like darkness and like that. Oh. So you be safe out there, okay? And I'll see you on the next time. Bye.
This is it. There are so many things I wanted to tell you.